much, Professor Ryan. Also, thank you for the great cooperation between your office and the embassy, and for inviting me to the diplomatic corner last week. It was a great honor for me to be invited. Thank you very much. I propose we give a round of applause to the two recipients. The final speaker in this part of the program, this last part, is Daniel Reiner, the Vice President of the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation and the Executive Director of its Jerusalem offices since 2008. Mr. Reiner was born in Argentina, so you see that there's an Argentina theme here, and emigrated to Israel in 1977. He later graduated from the Tel Aviv University, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Dear Ambassador Nestor, dear Dina, Professor Porat, thank you so much for organizing this meaningful event. To the co-speakers, I was mesmerized by your eloquent and thought-provoking and enlightening interventions. I think we learned a lot. I would like especially to acknowledge the presence of our foreign guests, Foreign Minister Urbach, Cecilia Olberg, the grandniece of Raoul Wallenberg. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And of course, my dear friend, Professor Erwin Cotter, who came from Canada, and he feels at home here in Israel. Distinguished members of the diplomatic corps and distinguished guests at large. I am very, very proud to stand here today representing the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation and carrying the greetings of our chairman, Mr. Eduardo Mikian, and our founder, Mr. Baruch Tenenbaum. The day after tomorrow, the world will mark the 70th anniversary of the disappearance of one of the greatest heroes known by mankind, Raoul Wallenberg. Raoul's story has all the elements to become I would say, a Hollywood blockbuster. He just didn't have Spielberg yet. He was a remarkable hero who saved scores of innocent lives in a very, very short period of time, exactly from July 9, 1944 until January 16, 1945, less than 7 months. At the same time, he himself became the victim, or a victim under the strangest of circumstances, and his fate is real even today. On January 17, 1945, Raoul Wallenberg went to see Marshal Rodyon Malinovsky, head of the Soviet military forces that liberated Budapest, and it is not clear whether he was summoned by the Soviet high-ranking officer or if he went by his own initiative with the purpose of discussing the future of the Jewish refugees. But as Cecilia said earlier, he himself, according to some historian accounts, had some misgivings, and he didn't know whether he was going as a guest or as a prisoner. He went to the rendezvous with his very faithful and trusted driver, Vilmos Lackfelder. And 7 years to that doomed day, a cloud of mystery still surrounds the fate of both of them. And despite the Soviet official admission that Wallenberg died on July 17, 1947, there's no real proof to substantiate that claim. Back in 2006, our foundation wrote a letter to the Russian embassy in Washington inquiring for credible information. This is something that we do on a constant basis. And Mr. Alexander Darkiev, then Deputy Chief of Mission, and now he's a very important personality at Foreign Ministry in Russia. He's head of the North American desk. He wrote to us, and I quote, "Circumstantial evidence gathered by the working group confirms that Mr. Wallenberg died, or most likely perished, in the USSR on July 17, 1947. Of course, by working group, Mr. Darkiev refers to the Russian side of the joint Swedish-Russian working group, which examined Wallenberg's case back in 2000. Mr. Darkiev continues by stating that, and again I quote, "The report of the Russian part of the working group contains a simple political conclusion. Responsibility for the death of Mr. Wallenberg lies with the USSR leadership at that time and on Joseph Stalin personally. I end the quote. This information might be true, we don't know, but the problem is that it was never corroborated. Moreover, the search work performed by an international commission headed by Professor Kotler and later work by various researchers, including Dr. Mackin and Ms. Berger, she was mentioned here by Professor Kotler, would indicate that Wallenberg was alive, clearly alive, after July 17, 1947. Now, even if we challenge the conclusion advanced by Ambassador Arkiev, it seems that one element is accurate, and it's the one referring to Stalin's personal responsibility to Mr. Wallenberg's fate. It is hard to believe, absolutely impossible, I would say, that Stalin was not involved in such a high-profile affair, and it's even more unlikely that the physical apprehension, let alone the liquidation of a foreign diplomat and a member of one of the most powerful families in Sweden would not leave a clear paper trace. This is why we continue asking or demanding the Russian authorities to enable an unfettered, unrestricted access to the KGB archives. Historians should be able to carefully study the archival evidence, as they might shed a lot of light into the fate of Raoul Wallenberg and that of Mr. Langfelder. We fail to understand the Russian obstinate stance not to allow such an access, especially after so much time elapsed. And with great pain, we must admit that we also fail to understand the strange passivity, and I say this with all due respect. I know here's my friend Ambassador Nesser and all the Swedish representatives, and the strange passivity adopted by the various Swedish governments, especially at that time, from the day Wallenberg was abducted to this very date. But I think that true friendship really allows this type of direct talk. We are really disappointed. Beyond its moral obligation towards Wallenberg, one must underscore that Sweden had and still has a great deal of diplomatic and economic leverage which could be used to bring Raoul back home. Back in 2012, former Minister of Integration Erik Ullenhag, and I hope I pronounce his name correctly, made the following significant statement in an event hosted by Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. I think that Dina remembers that. It was on occasion of Raoul Wallenberg's 100th birthday in 2012. And I quote, "I'm so proud to represent the same country as Raoul Wallenberg, but to be honest," says former Minister Ullenhag, "I can't be proud of Swedish history concerning Wallenberg. I am sorry we left the Wallenberg family too alone. I'm sorry that we did not, for a long time, tell the story of Raoul Wallenberg. I'm sorry we did not dare to do enough to find out what happened to the brave Swedish diplomat." End of quote. We think Mr. Ullenhag is right. Sweden could have done much more to bring her son back home, and it's mind-boggling that she did not, and still does not. Not less perplexing is the passive stance adopted by the Wallenberg family, and here I have to be very clear. I don't mean the innermost circle, but the powerful, the wealthy Wallenberg empire. Raoul's father, as Cecilia said, passed away before his son was born, and he was the first cousin of Jacob and Marcus Wallenberg, who at that time were at the helm of the Wallenberg economic empire. The sad truth is that the Wallenberg family profited from the Second World War. While Marcus was in charge of the commerce with the UK and other allies, Jacob dealt with the Germans. We have in our possession photocopies of Jacob's multiple visa entries to Berlin during the war. Some historians have raised the conjecture that Raoul was apprehended by the Russians because of his family's dealings with the Nazis, which allegedly included cloaking of ownership of Nazi assets to the Wallenberg family. This should require, of course, further investigation. I cannot make any assertion of that. We also have the copy of a letter sent by Mr. John Pelly, who was the executive director of the War Refugee Board, the US agency that sent Raoul to his life-saving mission to Budapest. This letter, dated September 18, 1947, was addressed to his former boss, Henry Morgenthau Jr., who was Secretary of the Treasury during World War II of President Roosevelt. He pressed hard to establish the War Refugee Board with the aim of saving the remaining of the Jewish Hungarian community. I won't read Mr. Pelle's entire letter, which urged Morgenthau to try and extricate Wallenberg from the USSR, but I shall quote his postscriptum, his PS, and I quote, "I might add that while Raoul Wallenberg bears the name of a prominent and wealthy Swedish family, his problem and those of his immediate relatives are of no concern to the most prominent Wallenbergs." End of quote. Back in 2012, coinciding with Wallenberg's 100th birthday, the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation instituted a 500,000 euros reward for any person or entity that could provide scientifically reliable information into the fate and whereabouts of both Raoul Wallenberg and Vilmos Schweinfurter. We know this is a very long shot, but we think it's worth trying. In all our efforts to try and shed light on this tragedy, we're inspired by the lifelong quest of Raoul's own brother, the late Professor Guy von Dardel, that Cecilia mentioned, and also her dear grandmother, Nina Lagergren. Both of them dedicated their life to find out the truth about Raoul's fate. I would like to conclude my presentation by saying that in 2013, and this is a little bit personal, but I think it's relevant, I had the privilege of meeting with another hero, Sir Nicholas Winton, who organized the famous kinder transport from Czechoslovakia to the UK, saving the lives of 667 children who were adopted by foster families, which he himself organized. He did so in 1936 with a lot of foresight and vision, of course. I met him in London and had a lively chat with him. And why I'm stressing that? Because Sir Nicholas Winton was born in 1909. Namely, at that time he was 104 years old, and now he's 105. He celebrated his birthday on May 19th, meaning that he's 3 years older than Raoul Wallenberg. He's absolutely clear-minded, lucid, and still has a wonderful sense of humor. When I saw him, I could not avoid the feeling that Raoul could still be alive. I know this is extremely unlikely, it's even science fiction, but one cannot control one's own thoughts. Now, as the Wallenberg Foundation, we pledge to continue working to preserve and spread around the legacies of Raoul and of all other saviors. Today, for instance, on the 15th of January, in Rome, we're holding a ceremony at the Casa Santa Brigida, a local convent in Rome, which gave refuge to Jewish women and children during the Holocaust. We shall unveil a special plaque, making or marking this place as a house of life. This project goes on, and so far we have identified already more than 100 houses of life throughout Europe, and we will continue doing so. And we also pledge to continue struggling for Raoul, the victim. We owe him that much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reiner. This concludes the program for today. I would like to thank the speakers for their great contributions, our colleagues for helping to put the conference together, and of course I would like to specifically once again single out you for the great cooperation and your colleague Ramit. I also wanted to mention, of course, my colleagues Julia and Eva. Thank you very much, and that's not here, which also worked on preparing this. I want also to once again say how very pleased we are that Jens Orban and Cecilia Oliver could join us from Sweden for this very important conference. It means so much to us. Thank you very much. With this, I will let you conclude the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. As you have heard many times today, this is the 28th year that we are having a final ceremony and awarding the scholarships. And it is already a tradition to read a poem by the poet Nathan Alterman, wrote in October 1943, when Sweden accepted into its borders the Jews from Denmark. I'd like to add, he didn't know it at the time. We all learned about it, about so many more details after the war. But Sweden sort of changed policy and attitude in 43, in the middle of 43. And it was really a change. And since 1943, Sweden accepted tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of refugees from Finland, from Norway, from Poland, from the Baltic countries. There was a question of how to feed all of them. There was even a session held by the Swedish government, how to feed all these people. And the question was, should we take off the rations of Swedish citizens? So it was, I would say, really a national enterprise to get in refugees. Started 1943 and continued with the efforts of Count Bernadotte later until 1945. Alterman did not know all of this. Had he known, he would have added a few lines, but his lines are the following, and the poem is called The Swedish Language. I will not all read all of it, but just a few ones. Few are those who know the Swedish language. Who speaks it? Perhaps only the Swedes. The country lies far away amongst mountains and fjords, and the people is small, almost hidden. And when Sweden said, I accept all Jews coming from the Danish border, all nations in the world realize how poor the Swedish vocabulary is. For many a country have already thus declared, I accept, but first to show the treasures of the language, abundant with words such as infiltration, quota, and visa. Only in Swedish such words do not exist. And when a hunted boy knocks on the border, she does not turn to look into the maps. She simply welcomes him in, not knowing it is a question of transport. For the style is as colorful, the other countries, the style is as colorful as a butterfly. Utmost limit of possibilities, absorption capacity. Only in Sweden they still stick to the barbarian custom to offer the wanderer a bed and a cup of tea. Therefore, Sweden is not particular about definitions or about regulations and bureaus. She simply writes, entrance granted. Will God forgive her for such poor style? And angels whisper to each other, how deep is the abyss? These two simple words brought tears into the eyes of the Almighty.